you will find what goes around, goes around, goes around, goes all the way around. What goes around, goes around, goes around, goes all the way around. What goes around, goes around, goes around, goes all the way.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I invite you to kindly stand for the national anthem of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you. I absolutely agree. Please be seated. Such a beautiful rendition of the national anthem of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, and that was just performed by Deron Elise, pianist, and we would have seen him perform with the National Steel Symphony Orchestra yesterday. Senator the Honorable Paul Ogopi Schoon, Minister of Trade and Industry, Trinidad and Tobago, His Excellency Peter Cavendish, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary, His Excellency Wamkele Mene, Secretary General, African Continental Free Trade Area, Dr. Lynette Holder, Chairman of the Caribbean Export Development Agency Board, Mr. Deodat Maharaj, Executive Director, Caribbean Export Development Agency, Dr. Carla Barnett, Secretary General, CARICOM, Sir Joseph Cox, Assistant Secretary General, CARICOM, Annette Mark, President, Caribbean Association of Investment Promotion Agencies, members of the Diplomatic Corps, government officials, investors, private sector leaders, to our speakers, presenters, panelists, moderators, as well as exhibitors, staff and leadership of the Caribbean Export Development Agency, friends of the media, all ladies and gentlemen. Buenos dias, bonjour, bon dia, buongiorno, bom dia, guten morgen, Sao Shang Hao, guten morgen, hiva, huomenda, good morning. Have we not had our cup of coffee already? This is going to be an exciting day one of the Caribbean Investment Forum. It is hosted by the Caribbean Export Development Agency in association with the Ministry of Trade and Industry and CAIPA. Again, we want to acknowledge the European Union for its continued support and funding to make this all possible. Of course, we cannot leave out our platinum sponsors, Ernst & Young, Republic Bank Limited, and I understand that the Republic Bank Limited will be giving away an Amazon Echo Dot every single day, and you can have your chance to win when you scan. So I'll get some more information on that. We also want to acknowledge our other platinum sponsors, Thoughtful Digital Agency, Draper Startup House, CARICOM, and of course, we thank CARICOM and the Caribbean Development Bank for their continued support. Why are we here, ladies and gentlemen? I think we heard it yesterday, because the Caribbean is open for business and we are a prime destination. And so this forum grants us the opportunity to get investors, and business persons, entrepreneurs, all in one place to help generate more business. What are the next steps? What have we learned? What are the lessons? What are the global trends? And what are the industry insights? What the Caribbean Export Development Agency has done is curated this forum to ensure that we've gotten the best persons, the best experts, and the best moderators to guide us where that is concerned. So we have a fantastic 3-day conference forum here for you. In the middle of your tables, your center tables, you will see tent cards. At the end of each session, we just ask you to scan your QR code just so that we can get your feedback after each session. If you missed yesterday's welcome reception, may I see a show of hands who was actually present at the welcome reception? For those of you who were not in attendance, do I speak on behalf of everyone when I say they missed out? They missed out real big. It was a cultural tapestry, if I would, between the songs, the dances, the instruments. It was simply beautiful, and it was a perfect way to kick off today's forum. If you're asking who is this person on the stage, I am Dr. Terry Carrell-Reed, and I have the pleasure of serving you as host over the next couple of days. So let us get started. This is a very important forum, and although we want you to engage, we want you to forge your partnerships, we certainly want to remind you that this is not a talk shop, but really actionable. And so on that note, it takes me great pleasure in inviting Sir Deodat Maharaj, Executive Director, Caribbean Export, to kindly do the welcome remarks. Please make him welcome.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reed. Honorable Minister Paula Gopiskun, Your Excellency Peter Cavendish, Your Excellency Dr. Carlo Barnett, Your Excellency Wamkele, Mene, who traveled all the way from Ghana to be with us today to deliver the feature address. Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Excellencies, Honorable Ministers, Dr. Holder, Lynette Holder, the Chair of our Board of Directors and board members, and over 500 business people from across the globe and from the Caribbean as well, who have joined us today. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, good morning. Yeah, you know, in Trinidad and Tobago, I happen to be from this beautiful land. When we say good morning, everybody responds, good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah. For me, it's really a signal honor to be standing before you today at this Caribbean Investment Forum. Taking place, and I was speaking with Her Excellency Carlo Barnett, so I'm happy to be here, standing before you for this Caribbean Investment Forum that's taking place not in Miami, not in New York, not in London, not in Toronto, but right here in Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean. Yeah. And it's a pleasure to be here in this pulsating Twin Island Republic of Trinidad and Tobago with its magical diversity and whose warmth and hospitality are world-renowned. Speaking about warmth and hospitality, allow me to extend to you, Minister Gopiskun, and your government, our deepest appreciation for the excellent support and collaboration, without which, to be quite honest, this landmark and inaugural Caribbean Investment Forum would not be taking place right here in the Caribbean. So thank you, Minister, and your government. I would also like to thank our partners, including the European Union, CARICOM, the Caribbean Development Bank, the Caribbean Association of Investment Promotion Agencies, CAF Bank, Ernst & Young, PFAN, and others who joined us at the very onset. A special thanks and once again, a warm welcome, a warm Caribbean welcome to you, Your Excellency Wamkele Mene, Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area, the largest single free trade area on this planet in terms of the number of countries. You know, people from Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean, His Excellency traveled from Ghana. He could have been at COP, he could have been anywhere in the world. Let's give him a warm Caribbean welcome. For myself, having lived, served, and traveled extensively not across Africa, but across rising Africa. I think it is so vital that we translate our inextricable historical and people and cultural ties into trade and investment relationships that would be good for the people of Africa and certainly good for the people of the Caribbean. And Excellency, your presence here today is eloquent testimony of your commitment to deepen our relationship and to advance this agenda. I very much look forward to your keynote, as does everybody here, as we seek to build a stronger relationship and build a robust and resilient bridge from the Caribbean to Africa and vice versa, for the benefit of our people and for the benefit of African people. I think that is absolutely critical. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Caribbean Export, as the agency with the remit for promoting the region's trade globally and steering investments our way, is really delighted to welcome you to this flagship Caribbean Investment Forum. The response has really been overwhelming. And I ask myself, why has this response been so overwhelming? I think the answer is simple, because the Caribbean Investment Forum is providing a platform for business to engage with business, to do what? To create business. And why we want to do this? Because we at Caribbean Export, we understand quite clearly that it's about jobs and opportunities for our people. It's not about rocket science. It's about jobs and opportunities for our people. And I think the over 600 participants, 90% of whom come from the business community across the Caribbean, every single CARICOM countries here, Your Excellency Carlo Barnett, the Dominican Republic, part of the CARIFORUM group of countries, from Latin America, Europe, Abu Dhabi, Asia. I mean, we have Canada, we have United States of America. So the response has been really overwhelming, and we are delighted. But I'm also happy with the response, but also the fact that the Caribbean Investment Forum has a forensic focus on business. And as I've said earlier, what we have sought to do is to create that platform for business, to engage with business, to generate business. So it's about less talk and more business. We also understand quite clearly it is about creating jobs and opportunities for our people, and I'll be speaking about this over and over in the forum. But the key for us is to focus on the main drivers that can truly advance Caribbean transformation. If we remain at the periphery of the development debate, and if we continue to focus on the tangential issues, we cannot drive that Caribbean transformation. And that is why we at Caribbean Export, we believe we need to advance a truly transformational agenda for the region. And what we are doing, we are focusing on the sectors that we believe can achieve that. So one, we know we are climate vulnerable, but so green economy transition is one. Two, digitalization, technology, and innovation, absolutely vital. Three, agriculture, with a big focus on ag tech. And four, transport and logistics. This is because I believe that if we progress in these sectors, we will achieve success. However, to build a truly resilient Caribbean, business must be an essential partner, playing not a peripheral or a tangential role, but a central role. So let us start with this transition to a green economy. It is now crystal clear, if there's any doubt, that the Caribbean region will continue to be vulnerable to climate change. The point is often made that our countries are not responsible for this crisis. And I agree with that point. And this is true. But however, quite frankly, it does not matter that climate change will affect our countries in a manner disproportionate to our level of greenhouse gas emissions. What matters simply is the fact that it will. Whilst we need international support, and we must make every effort to get that assistance, we cannot just wait, we cannot just sit and wait for the help of others. We in the Caribbean must be masters of our own destiny and need to stand on our own 2 feet as proud and capable Caribbean people. For me, the big question is how to work to translate this challenge into opportunity. It is well understood by many in the region that there's an undeniable relationship between our energy systems on the one hand and macroeconomic stability and economic development on the other hand. A green economy transition presents the ideal opportunity to lessen pressure on foreign exchange, as well as limit exposure to price volatility in the international energy markets, as we are seeing now. Equally important, the transition has the potential to spur economic growth by lowering the marginal cost of energy for the private sector, as well as lowering overall energy intensity. Perhaps what is not spoken about enough are the potential opportunities for the growth of the private sector in a green economy transition. In a joint report published by the International Labour Organization and the Inter-American Development Bank, they estimated a green economy transition will result in the generation of an additional 400,000 jobs in the Caribbean. In the scenario that we are living in this Caribbean of ours, one job is important. 400,000 is a big boost to our economy. In addition, the International Renewable Energy Agency estimates that for every United States dollar invested in energy transition, an additional 93 cents, US 93 cents, almost a dollar, will occur above the business as usual scenario in the region. So basically, you get 100% return. However, the reality is that a green economy transition is going to cost a lot. And according to the IDB, the region will require approximately 16.1 billion United States dollars in investment by 2040. Given these requirements, we need to mobilize the right partners, especially business, who can help build and support the requisite infrastructure. This understanding is at the core of our rationale for a Caribbean Investment Forum, because we know that such a transition will not only strengthen our resilience, but also, guess what? Create jobs and opportunities for our people, hence the need for investment in the sector. I'm also keen to just touch on the issue of digitalization and innovation as drivers of Caribbean transformation via a partnership with business. To start with, digitalization is fundamental to the integration of our businesses into the global economy and indeed the regional economy. Over the last 40 years, it is the growth of digital information and communication technologies which have facilitated globalization as we understand it. Technologies such as artificial intelligence, blockchain, digital platforms, virtual reality, big data, and cloud computing are delivering new capabilities for businesses which are accelerating product innovation and providing new economies of scope and scale. It is our job to ensure that our private sector is not left behind and can leverage these opportunities to leapfrog. So now it's not just like catching up, it's about leapfrogging in capabilities across all sectors through innovative applications of Industry 4.0 technologies. To do so, we need investments. And it is good to see the range of incentives across our jurisdictions for investors in this area, as will be presented by our investment promotion agencies who are all here. I should also know that digital technologies can not only help our businesses reach new customers, but also engage in collaborating in business-to-business efforts with counterparts, not only in the Caribbean, but across the globe. This is why we at the Caribbean Export Development Agency have initiated pioneering initiatives, such as the Virtual E-Commerce Accelerator Program, to help take our exporters to this new age. The beauty of technology and digitalization is its democratizing effect, giving every company, wherever you are in this Caribbean of ours, an opportunity to advocate, to advertise, and profile your product globally. In fact, much will be said over the next few days about the issue of supply chains, because it is not by accident that alongside digitalization, we will be focusing heavily on opportunities in transportation and logistics. The vision for an integrated region, facilitated in part by robust transportation linkages and logistics capabilities, is a vision we must realize. Again, another opportunity for business. At Caribbean Export, we interface directly with the private sector, and we understand the challenges that you face across the region. Our countries have worked hard to build deep networks of trade relationships, often punching above their weight. and getting access to markets. However, a key stumbling block has been reaching these markets and logistics and transport. Caribbean heads have clearly recognized the importance of this priority area, and the segment on transport and logistics will speak to the range of incentives and opportunities for investors in this truly vital sector for us. We have singled out agriculture in particular, given our keen awareness of the food insecurity challenges in the region. A key driver of this focus is our deep appreciation for the commitment of our region to achieve a reduction in food imports by 25% by the year 2025. And I would really like to commend you, Secretary General, Dr. Carla Barnett, and your team at the Secretariat, and all those who have been involved in relentlessly pursuing this agenda to advance agriculture and to make the region self-sufficient in food. I mean, it's really commendable. And what I like very much, I participated in the agribusiness forum in Guyana in May of this year, and there's follow-up action. So that's the essence of what we need to do, to continue to relentlessly pursue this agenda to achieve success. For us, business and additional investments are critical to achieve this vision. This is especially so given the fact that apart from countries like Belize, Guyana, the Dominican Republic, and Suriname, we simply do not have land space to produce on the scale required to make us food secure. The answer is that we must look at technology. And given this conviction, we have worked with the government of Guyana in 2021 to convene the first ever AgTech Investment Summit, spearheaded by His Excellency President Ali of Guyana, where investment opportunities in AgTech were promoted. Again in Dubai in March 2022, we promoted scalable AgTech projects from the region seeking investments. Here again, AgTech is once more at the forefront of this agenda over the next few days. I am sure, Secretary General Barnett, this will be an element of your remarks as well. Before I close, I really wanted to emphasize that we in the Caribbean have sun and sea and sand, but you know, the reality is we are much more than sun, sea, and sand. We have unique advantages ranging from political stability, excellent location, and a skilled people due to a highly educated labor force with an average literacy rate of over 90%. Additionally, when you think about the Caribbean, people think small, but I beg to differ. CARICOM countries and the Dominican Republic represent a market of close to 30 million people. Just before COVID-19, we had close to 30 million stayover arrivals in terms of tourists a year, which when added to our 30 million Caribbean citizens, we have a market of close to 60 million for those who are willing to supply the domestic and tourist markets with agricultural produce, as an example. Speaking about markets, we do not have a shortage of trade agreements, including an economic partnership agreement with the European Union, free trade agreements with Costa Rica and Colombia, access to the UK market, as well as those in Canada and the US, where we can export our products duty-free, tariff-free, and quota-free. Just the European market gives investors access to a lucrative export market of close to 500 million people. So participants, investors, businesses here, when we think Caribbean, do not think small, think opportunity, think possibility, and think access, given that we can be used as a beachhead to access lucrative markets further afield. In closing, allow me to once more thank the government of Trinidad and Tobago, our partners and my staff who have worked hard, not just to make this event a success, but an outstanding success. We at Caribbean Export believe that in these unprecedented times, being good, to be quite honest, is just not good enough. Excellence must be our calling card. And I owe a deep debt of gratitude to my staff who did simply an amazing job. Thank you so very much for every success achieved. They deserve full credit. And for any shortcomings, of course, I accept full responsibility. Thanks again, and a warm welcome to this Caribbean Investment Forum focused on creating jobs and opportunities for our people. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Maharaj. Such a fantastic address. He covered so much. First of all, thank you for reminding us the work that Caribbean Export does in terms of building the bridge and the forensic focus on business. He spoke about this being less about talk, more about action, and more about business, and using the relevant, timely, practical data to drive the theme, which is building a smarter, greener Caribbean. I'll even go as far to say a more resilient Caribbean. Agritech, renewable energy, ICT and digital business, transport and logistics are the areas of focus for us. It reminded me of an African proverb as he spoke that said, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. Lastly, he spoke about the importance of collaboration and partnership. But more importantly, it is important for us to understand that we need to position ourselves as the thought leaders, the innovators, the creators, and the great business-minded people we are, to be masters of our destiny. Thank you so very much again, Mr. Maharaj. Now, there was a lady's name that he kept on mentioning in terms of the great work that has been done, the focus, the galvanizing of certain industries and sectors. And so it is only natural that she should be the next speaker on the program. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together as we invite Dr. Carla Barnett, Secretary General, CARICOM, to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. It's always such a pleasure not only to be in Trinidad. The welcome is always wonderful, warm, and great, but to be in a room of business-minded persons who are focused on making those changes that we need to make to ensure that we are, forensically focused on business development, because at the end of the day, the policies and those are one thing, but the businesses need to get to work. And so in CARICOM, we have been pleased in the last few months to bring together business persons for agriculture. We had the forum in Guyana and in Trinidad, and then we brought the Afro-Exim Bank and that focus that we had with Caribbean producers and African business getting together. So the focus in CARICOM is on business. And I want to thank Deodat Maharaj for the collaboration that we're building in ensuring that we are focused on business, because business needs to get done. And so protocol having been accepted and now finally getting to my prepared remarks, it is my pleasure to be here today in this forum. We're placing a global spotlight on the range of possibilities for investing in the Caribbean. This initiative is being led by the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean Export Development Agency, and it could not be more timely. The COVID-19 pandemic has had a negative impact on foreign direct investment flows into CARICOM. However, there is tremendous scope for the growth of foreign direct investment, which will facilitate technology transfer and infrastructure development while creating jobs and generating profit. CARICOM has been challenged to attract FDI, foreign direct investment, and the annual investment flows have been consistently low from in the 1970s to the 1990s. The increases in FDI that we experienced with the turn of this century peaked at around 6.7 billion in 2008, when the global financial and economic crisis resulted in a sharp contraction in FDI flows into the region. The next highest point was in 2019 at US 3.9 billion. However, the onset of the pandemic saw a slide to US 2.4 billion. Investment matters now more than ever. This focus on investment is why Caribbean Export has been supporting the Caribbean Association of Investment Promotion Agencies to increase the region's capacity to attract foreign investment. I am aware that Caribbean Export has been working to package investment projects in key sectors such as agrotechnology, biotechnology, logistics and transport, hotel and resort development, and renewable energy. In March, the agency held its first ever Caribbean Investment Forum in Dubai, which we heard about earlier, and engaged with investors interested in scalable projects within these sectors. In May this year, at the launch of Caribbean Export's annual results report, I acknowledged the significant work that Caribbean Export was doing regarding investment. And I indicated then that I was looking forward to the continuation of this work. This was a challenge issued, and it is evident that Caribbean Export is stepping up to the plate in a magnificent way, including through this forum. I am delighted to see that the conference is intended to be ambitious in its agenda to explore opportunities in those sectors that challenge the region the most. Building a robust renewable energy sector is perhaps at the forefront of these opportunities, which this forum will explore. For CARICOM countries, like other small island and low-lying coastal developing states, the SIDS, climate change is an existential threat. To combat it, we are required to build environmental and economic resilience urgently. It also presents an opportunity for economic transformation. CARICOM's total contribution to global greenhouse gases emissions is extremely small. Therefore, low carbon energy transition within CARICOM will by no means solve the world's climate crisis. However, the cross-sectoral impact of energy transition within CARICOM and within the Caribbean would first of all liberate the region from energy dependency and lessen its exposure to external shocks. It would create fiscal space and lessen the burdens on countries' foreign reserves. And it would provide new and more flexible energy and other environmental services to commercial and industrial consumers. In addition, it would provide new avenues for investors to receive stable returns on infrastructure development and create new energy services companies, and in the process, create new employment. Since 2013, CARICOM agreed on an energy policy and later developed a roadmap and strategy which identified a target of 47% electricity generation from renewables by 2027. If we are to achieve this mandate, interventions such as this Caribbean Investment Forum are critical. Another key area of opportunity, of course, is agriculture. Food security is of significant concern for the people of the Caribbean. Generally, structural characteristics of our economies have meant that we import more than 60% of the food we eat, with some countries importing more than 80% of the food they eat. Over the period 2018 to 2020, in CARICOM alone, the food import bill was 13.76 billion, or approximately 5% of GDP. What is more, the challenge of sustainable agriculture is growing in severity, given the exposure of our agriculture sector to climate-related risks such as heat extremes, salination of groundwater, flooding, drought, and hurricanes. Recognizing this imperative within CARICOM, heads of government have committed to reducing the food import bill by 25% by 2025. Now, this commitment was made before the onset of COVID. This commitment was made in 2019. And since then, we've had some slowdown because of the impact of COVID. However, the focus remains with an investment in agriculture, in agrotechnology, at being critical to this. Therefore, the focus of this forum on agrotechnology is most relevant to achieving the ambitions that have been set by the heads of government, along with farmers and agro-processors. Increasing the use of technology in the sector will not only assist in increasing productivity and efficiency in production systems, but it will also make the sector more attractive to our youth, our young people, given their high level of comfort with technology in this digital age. And one of the projects that we're very much proud of as a corollary to our focus on agriculture is the involvement of young people in particular in the development of our agricultural enterprises in the projects that we are implementing. And I would like to invite you on our website, or caricom.org website, to view some of the videos that have been produced by our young farmers across this region, detailing how they have become involved in producing, in some instances, scalable products, in some instances, organic produce and building their markets, and in some instances, transforming the way they have been producing the commodities that they bring to market, from agroponics to cosmetics to all kinds of interesting stuff from our young people who are being invited in and enabled to become investors, producers, marketers, and proponents of agriculture as a sustainable way of making their lives in this region. The Caribbean community has also recognized the importance of digitalization to the competitiveness of the region, and among other things has taken steps to establish a CARICOM digital task force and a CARICOM single ICT space and roadmap and work plan. In this regard, the focus of this conference is very aligned with the regional agenda. Caribbean Export has been emphasizing the importance of innovation in digital technologies as a key for driving the post-COVID recovery. Small and medium enterprises in the region have been encouraged to leverage new technologies as they have the potential to radically transform existing enterprises and create new ones. Key sectors of application will, of course, include agriculture and manufacturing. New opportunities also exist for the application of digital technologies in the services sector, in areas such as the business of music and entertainment, tourism, logistics, marketing, and more. These technologies can also reshape energy systems through the integration of distributed low-carbon energy generation and the new demand-side energy management services, which I alluded to earlier. It has been long understood that true production integration in the region will require robust, flexible, low-cost transportation. In fact, the cost and availability of transportation services not only poses a problem for intra-regional trade, but also places limitations on the ability of our small and medium enterprises in particular to competitively penetrate markets outside of the region. Transportation is absolutely critical for us to be able to trade among ourselves and with third countries. The foundation of our transportation systems will require substantial investment in infrastructure and in logistics facilities. Our community has been working on several fronts to develop the right legislative framework, such as a multilateral air services agreement and the development of maritime transport services. In this regard, however, solving our transportation problems will depend on our ability to mobilize investment. It is my hope that the outcomes of this Caribbean Investment Forum will contribute to achieving those aspirations. As our region navigates these trying times, there is increasing need for cooperation and investment that support growth of our economies through transformative development in entrepreneurship, in science, and in technology. CARICOM remains committed to this mission of building an environmentally and economically resilient region, and we encourage investors to explore all the opportunities available. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Barnett, for your partner's remarks, just reminding us about the importance of food security, productivity, sustainability, agility, adaptability, inclusion, and innovation. Thank you for your words. We move to our next partner's remarks, and it comes by way of His Excellency Peter Cavendish, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary, Delegation of the European Union. Please make him welcome.
Senator, the Honourable Dr. Emmy Brown, Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, Senator, the Honourable Paula Gopi-Schoon, Minister in the Ministry of Trade and Industry, Secretary General Dr. Carla Burnett, Secretary General CARICOM, ambassadors, high commissioners, other members of the diplomatic corps, and all other protocols observed. First of all, I wish to offer my appreciation to the Government of the Republic and Trinidad and Tobago, which decided at cabinet level to propose and to host this Caribbean Investment Forum. This is a forward-looking act in a year in which this country celebrates not only 60 years of independence, but also 60 years of nationhood. We in the European Union have nearly 5 decades of partnership with the nations of this beautiful Caribbean, a Caribbean bounded by the Atlantic to the east and to the west, the only place on the planet where 2 oceans and 2 continents meet. Due to this geographical paradise, it is a region through upwards 1/3 of the world's trade passes. This is in addition to the 30+30 millions that my esteemed friend Deodat Maharaj has mentioned. It is a zone of peace. It is a zone of peace. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish to focus my remarks today on what the EU and our Team Europe, the European Union institutions, and the 27 member states of the European Union consider to be a palette of interventions and opportunities. Under the economic partnership agreements with Caribbean nations, EU companies and citizens have had and will continue to have the benefit of original and creative products and services from this region, and the Caribbean nations themselves have access to the EU's single market, the world's largest single market of over 450 million citizens. This access is one element for potential investors to consider in their decision to invest in the Caribbean. Other elements include the region's leading institutes and organizations, such as the Caribbean Industrial Research Institute, the Maritime Technology Cooperation Center, the world's #1 cocoa genome, the world's #1 cocoa research center, and much, much else. In Europe, an estimated 38 million of our citizens' jobs depend on international trade. Therefore, it is essential that we strengthen the supply chains and expand trade opportunities as we recover from COVID and work to build the greener and smarter economies of the future that we need. According to G20 estimates, the global infrastructure investment deficit will reach, in euro terms, 13 trillion by 2040. Under the Global Gateway Initiative, the EU and Team Europe is seeking to invest 300 billion euros in infrastructure between now and 2027. This initiative will bring together the resources of the European Union, including our member states, European financial institutions, and national development finance institutions. The European Union itself, under most of its funding instruments, gives only grants. We give the money. We invest in our partners, and the return on that investment is primarily for the citizens of the host countries. The European Investment Bank, which is owned by the member states of the European Union, is a not-for-profit bank. It is the world's oldest development bank, and I would say that in addition to the money and the capital and the expertise, the human investment, the human capital, the technological know-how, the savoir-faire are almost as important as the capital that it brings to bear. The European Investment Bank in the Caribbean has already put 2 billion in investments in 200 projects. The European Investment Bank has aligned all of its activities with the Paris Agreement, financing preferentially projects that contribute to fight climate change or are neutral to it. The European Investment Bank is always on the lookout now for low carbon projects that can support island states to achieve affordability and security in energy supply in green, clean, and a cost-competitive way. We explicitly will seek to avoid debt distress whenever we are working with our partners. I'm happy to announce that the European Union colleagues for international partnership funding and from the European Investment Bank are present with us today. Please seek to contact them at the margins of the meetings for further follow-up. I would like to note that whilst the capital to be made available is important, it comes with technical expertise and advice. We are combining financial capital, human capital, and guarantees for infrastructural projects in order to ensure that quality projects are undertaken and will be implemented successfully. This initiative will be complemented by initiatives of like-minded partners within the G7, for example, the US Build Back Better initiative. Additionally, the Global Gateway will build on the achievements of the EU-Asia Connectivity Strategy, connectivity partnerships with Japan and India, the Economic and Investment Plan for the Western Balkans, the Eastern Partnership, and the Southern Neighbourhood. The Global Gateway is fully aligned with the United Nations 2030 Agenda and its sustainable goals and the Paris Agreement. The Global Gateway will offer a positive choice for global infrastructure development. It'll be an investment in international stability and cooperation and demonstrate how democratic values offer certainty and fairness for investors, sustainability for partners, and long-term benefits around the world. Concretely, that investment will be directed towards clean energy, roads and bridges that are flood and storm-proof, modern water and sanitation facilities, port and transport hubs, and buildings that can withstand extreme heat waves and other extreme weather events. There will also be investments to prepare health systems for the pandemics of the future, to adapt farming to drier conditions, to equip workers with the skills that match the jobs of tomorrow, and in particular investments in digital infrastructure, because one of the fuels of the new economy is data. The environmental well-being of future generations depends more than ever before on the quality and the quantity of our infrastructure investments today. The Global Gateway is value-based, transparent, and open to the private sector. The 300 billion euros of investment in infrastructure projects combined with technical advice is intended to be a catalyst for growth. Global Gateway is about giving countries a choice and a better choice. Take vaccines, for example. In pandemic times, Europe has been the pharmacy of the world. It is a fact that for every dose of vaccine distributed inside Europe, 1 dose was shipped abroad. We are by far the world's largest exporter of vaccines. Yet this situation is not sustainable. The African continent imports 99% of the vaccines it needs. We agree with the African Union that this must change. The Global Gateway is in fact seeking to address this. In the coming months, we are building together with our African partners 2 factories in Rwanda and Senegal to manufacture mRNA vaccines. Starting next year, these vaccines will be sold at not-for-profit prices to African countries. They will be made in Africa for Africa with world-class technology. Similar work is also ongoing with Ghana and South Africa. Further to this, I'm pleased to announce that just yesterday, at the margins of COP27, the European Union President released a communique together with the Prime Minister of Barbados, the President of Guyana, and the President of Rwanda on the development of pharmaceuticals for global public health. The objective is that end-to-end production of 60% of all essential contemporary pharmaceuticals for the Caribbean and Latin America will be supported by a technological and financial bridge between Africa and this region. Also of direct relevance is our investment in human capital. The European Union is separately spending 22.6 billion worldwide on education under Erasmus+. This is from now to 2027. The European Union has worked for over 30 years in this investment in human capital, and here in the Caribbean, calls for applications under Erasmus+ will open this month for proposals for educational capacity building. This month, there will be approximately 15 million euros available for third-level bodies, universities, vocational and technical institutes to bid for, with grants ranging from 100,000 euros to 400,000 euros. The European Union has already happily worked with one of the world's only 2 multi-country, multi-campus universities, the University of the West Indies. The EU has also worked with other third-level bodies here and across the Caribbean. This investment in human capital is in effect a real subsidy to research and development across many areas relevant to the modern economy. Going forwards, we need good projects, we need mature projects, and that is where we need you, the business community, international parties, host nations, and other counterparts. We need your advice, we need your knowledge, and we stand ready with our capital and technological knowledge to make it happen. The European Union remains hopeful that the European Union LAC 2023 summit between the 2 continents will give a new impetus to our relations. We have begun work on an EU Latin America and Caribbean investment package with details to be announced at the bilateral summit in 2023. This will be comparable to the EU African Union Global Gateway investment package, which we are already implementing. As one of the world's largest economies, the European Union is a prime mover in global trade and investment, and due to our shared common objectives for a smarter, greener economy, a natural partner for this region. It is a partnership that we very much value and one that we will continue to work to grow in the future. This is the European Union's offer to our friendly countries worldwide. It is based on our European interests and our values, and it is designed to deliver long-lasting benefits to the countries that choose to do business with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Your Excellency, and we commend the EU for continuing to boost and support communities and nations. Thank you for also recognizing our unique creative advantages individually as islands as well as collectively. We appreciate your delivery. Now, the Ministry of Trade and Industry, Trinidad and Tobago, understands the importance of planning, preparing, and positioning the Caribbean as a prime destination for opportunities. And the minister in particular is a driver and advocate of transformation. And she is on a mission to create opportunities which will lead positive economic impact in the region. Ladies and gentlemen, our featured address comes by way of Senator the Honorable Paula Gopi-Scoon, Minister of Trade and Industry, Trinidad and Tobago. Please let us welcome her.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Dr. Terry Carrell-Reid. Happy to have you in Trinidad and Tobago. And allow me to recognize my esteemed colleagues, Senator the Honorable Amory Brown, Dr. Amory Brown, the Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, my other cabinet colleagues, the Minister of Public Administration, Minister Alison West, the Minister of Digital Transformation, Minister Hassan Bacchus, His Excellency Peter Cavendish, the Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary Delegation of the European Union, Your Excellencies, Heads of Mission and other members of the Diplomatic Corps, Her Excellency Dr. Carla Bennett, Secretary General of CARICOM, and I know Joseph Cox, the Assistant Secretary General, is also here. His Excellency Wamkele Mene, the Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area, and members of the Board of Directors of CEDA, Mr. Deodat Miraj, the Executive Director of CEDA, permanent secretaries and senior government officials, representatives of the CDB and Caribbean Association of Investment Promotion Agencies, Caribbean Investment Forum delegates, captains of industry, members of the media, good morning all and welcome. And it is indeed my pleasure to extend a warm welcome to each of you, to our region and to Trinidad and Tobago, on behalf of our Prime Minister, Dr. the Honorable Keith Rowley, who is unavoidably absent from today's proceedings. And it is a privilege and honor for our Twin Island nation to host this Caribbean Investment Forum. And I would like to commend all the institutions and officials who have made this unique and exciting business-centric event a reality. In particular, the Caribbean Export Development Agency, the CARICOM Secretariat, the Caribbean Development Bank, the Caribbean Association of Investment Promotion Agencies, and of course, all of our sponsors. For CARIFORUM countries, our cooperation is an important source of socioeconomic development for the citizens of the region, done in collaboration with the European Union, which continues to be a valuable partner. CARICOM and the Dominican Republic have had a constructive relationship with the EU, whether it be through the Lomé or Cotonou agreements with long-standing African and Pacific partners, or through the CARIFORUM EU Economic Partnership Agreement. And this engagement further fortifies linkages between and among CARIFORUM countries, as well with Europe and the Caribbean through the Dutch and French countries and territories. I am therefore delighted that we have with us here today the Secretary General Wamkele Mene of the African Continental Free Trade Area, and representatives from all of the CARIFORUM countries, as well as delegates from Curacao and Martinique representing their respective economic development promotion units. And I mentioned that just last week, I've had the honor of leading a trade mission to Curacao, which yielded many positive outcomes, and they too are here today. And I would like to make special mention of our colleagues from Haiti, who despite the challenges are here with us this morning. The wide representation of delegates from around the world is no doubt indicative of an eagerness to engage and to foster or deepen business linkages with the Caribbean. And a number of investment promotion agencies will share with you attractive projects and demonstrate that the Caribbean is indeed a premier investment destination. Looking at the global economic environment, the International Monetary Fund in its July 22nd World Economic Outlook noted that several shocks have hit a global economy already weakened by the pandemic. Higher than expected inflation worldwide, a worse than anticipated slowdown in China, and further negative spillovers from the war in Ukraine. The baseline forecast is for global growth to slow from 6.1% last year to 3.2% in 2022. A 0.4 percentage points lower than indicated in the April 2022 World Economic Outlook. And the same trend is expected in Latin America and the Caribbean. So that there is no doubt that foreign direct investment remains the major catalyst for development and integration of countries in the global economy. And according to the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, foreign direct investment in Latin America and the Caribbean rose by 56% in 2021, sustained by inflows, but this is Caribbean, listen to me, Latin America and the Caribbean. And this is sustained by inflows in traditional industries such as automotive manufacturing, financial and insurance services, electricity provision, and information and communication services. In the Caribbean, FDI increased by 39%, mainly driven by increases in mining, financial services, and special economic zones. The majority of the FDI flows went to the Dominican Republic, and we must commend our CARIFORUM partner on their achievements. But we trust that this forum will act as a catalyst to boost our entire region's flows. And this is a major reason why we're here, to showcase our progress and our bankable investment opportunities. And although it may appear to be purely transactional, investments redound directly to the people of the receiving countries and by extension, the region, especially if that investment is in sectors with wide-ranging multiplier effects. FDI, therefore, is an important component in delivering on the United Nations 2030 agenda for sustainable development, where no one is left behind. But why invest in the Caribbean? The Caribbean region, in this era of unprecedented global disruption and turbulence, remains a place of relative certainty and continues to be an attractive location for foreign directed investment due to a number of key factors. And one, the region's economic and political stability. The region remains largely one of stability, democracy, and continuity. And although there may be political change, the institutions, the laws, and the policies remain largely intact, so that together with stable levels of GDP and exchange rates, investors have predictability and security that their investments are respected in practice and under the rule of law in the Caribbean. And secondly, our people. The Caribbean's greatest resource is its people, with diverse cultures and languages, but a predominance of English and a world-class education and training facilities. The Caribbean boasts a highly skilled population, gender equality, and overall high literacy rates in countries such as Barbados, I won't call all, 99.9% according to the World Bank, Antigua and Barbuda, 99.8%, St. Kitts and Nevis, 99%, Grenada, 99%. And thirdly, our location and the accessibility of the Caribbean. And to the Caribbean's advantage, it is uniquely positioned, a gateway to the Americas, North, South, and Central America, and a mere 6 hours direct away from the west coast of Africa from some locations directly. And when a firm locates within the region, its market is more than just here, and it extends to more than 1 billion people with whom access is available. And through our numerous trade and investment agreements, this becomes a significant and real opportunity for growth and expansion. As an example, through the CARIFORUM EU EPA, businesses in CARIFORUM countries are afforded favorable access to EU markets for goods and services. And this partnership provides for strengthened trade-related institutions, enhanced competitiveness of economic operators, and the promotion of diversification. And fourthly, our abundant natural resources. The size of the Caribbean belies its richness of resources. And with unique geography, histories, flora and fauna, Each island is a treasure trove of experiences. And as with most small island developing states, a significant marine space offers key economic and investment opportunities in the maritime sector and ocean-based industries such as fisheries and tourism. And in addition to the pristine beaches, beautiful landscapes, and rich pasts, the Caribbean is also a great place to live and to work. And the last that I will mention today, our country's significant trade openness. And according to the World Bank, Caribbean countries in 2021 exhibited high levels of trade openness, including Belize at 105%, Trinidad and Tobago at 76%, Jamaica 75%, the Bahamas at 70%. And these are just the highlights of the region's readiness, our openness, and our resilience. And now, though, more than ever, is indeed the right time to invest in the Caribbean. The forum's theme, Building a Smarter, Greener Caribbean, touches on two of the most defining issues of the 21st century. Digital technology is continually transforming our world and has fundamentally changed the way we exist. And in the Caribbean, it is no different. This year, CariForum approved enhanced initiatives for fast-tracking digital transformation, encouraging a greater number of girls in ICT, and the creation of a digital skills task force, all towards advancing digital skills in the region for economic and social development. The region is home to countries with advanced ICT infrastructure, and this has led to an accelerated growth of public-private partnerships and greater private sector involvement in development projects. The Caribbean Regional Communications Infrastructure Program, supported by the World Bank, is an ongoing project that is intended to complement the regional strategy through the creation of an ICT-enabled development framework. And currently, 3 regional nations are participating in the first phase: Grenada, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and St. Lucia. And we welcome the EU's ongoing commitment to the region's development, including funding through the funding of digital innovation in the Caribbean. And in fact, through the 11th European Union Development Fund, 15 innovators from Trinidad and Tobago received grants to upscale their innovations and expand their reach into international markets. And here at home, Trinidad and Tobago can claim the region's most advanced single electronic window and is committed to the creation of a digital society encompassing a digital economy and digital government. The region's first FinTech Innovation Hub will be implemented in 2023 as a collaborative environment with an on-site ecosystem where regulators, financial sector actors, government, FinTech startups, and innovators, both local and foreign, can connect and collaborate to achieve the goal of a cashless society in Trinidad and Tobago. But like technology, greening the economy has become a core strategy for many governments, and it's recognized as a key driver in tackling climate change, in tackling poverty, in tackling pollution, health, and several critical development goals. Global warming is an immediate threat to humanity, and at a recent CARICOM heads meeting in Suriname in July, this was the nature of the discussions with the UN Secretary General and the Secretary General of the Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States. Governments across the world, in both the developed and developing world, are fast adapting to the new reality of the need to green, where both business and the environment can win. Indeed, the 27th United Nations Climate Change Conference, currently taking place in Egypt, reinforces this approach to development and our collective responsibility. Being green is no longer an avoidable cost of doing business. It is a catalyst for innovation, new market opportunities, wealth creation, and more resilient economies. Caribbean countries are effecting this transition through greener economic development policies, improved resource efficiency, and increased local production. And the region indeed has seen the need to reduce dependence on fossil fuels and develop greater self-reliance on renewable energy, as outlined in the CARICOM Energy Policy and the Caribbean Sustainable Energy Roadmap and Strategy. Harnessing local endowments of natural resources creates more sustainable opportunities, which in turn provides jobs, reduces exposure to price volatility, and decreases environmental liabilities and risks. As with technology, the region is seeking investors willing to build upon a strong foundation to exploit abundant opportunities in renewable energy and green initiatives. Keep in view the Caribbean's innate advantage of significant wind energy potential and sunshine, which offer interesting prospects for wind and solar energy generation. And our international partners are already supporting projects in the area, but we need more. Beyond these areas, there are several other lucrative investment opportunities. And by far, the most important agenda item in the region is to feed ourselves and to reduce the food import bill. And the regional food import bill is quickly moving, I understand from this morning, $13 billion US, and is substantial when viewed in the context of the Caribbean. Food security is therefore a major challenge. In CARICOM, as we heard earlier, we have committed to reducing the region's food import bill by 25% by 2025, through in large part by the implementation of the CARICOM Agri-Food Systems Agenda, with 4 key areas of priority to be addressed, being food insecurity, regional transportation, trade barriers, and women and youth involvement. We will also give special attention to priority crops and products, which are highly imported products in the region. Agriculture is a sound investment with 30 million local consumers and several million affluent visitors to the Caribbean region each year. Excellent climate, strong local demand for agricultural products, tourist demand for specialty products, and abundant public and private lands available for agriculture have created significant opportunities for investors in high growth, high value agro-industries. The future looks a bit brighter, as this important matter has brought about concrete regional responses. And this year, 2 major agri-investment fora and expos have been successfully held in Guyana and Trinidad and Tobago, with a 3rd being planned for Barbados. So we remain firmly committed to the cause and intend to build extensively on these initiatives. We expect that the Transport and Logistics Roundtable on day 3 to be an exciting one, with regional participants, including from key port authorities, discussing the advantages of the Caribbean's location and mutually beneficial avenues for investments in areas such as port infrastructure and services and strengthened logistics, among others. The business model of transportation and logistics is fast evolving, and just over a week ago, the Port of Port of Spain launched its public-private partnership structuring process in collaboration with the Inter-American Development Bank, who is here today, in order to facilitate port investments, development and operations, shipping, logistics, and cruise operations. And with 2 international seaports, highway infrastructure among the best in the region, and developed space for economic development, Trinidad and Tobago is expected to maintain its rank as one of the top countries in terms of connectivity flows. But I would also like to recognize Jamaica for their efforts in making significant strides in port development as they seek to become a major player in the global transport and logistics industry. As I conclude, we must recognize that the Caribbean has had some strides over the past several decades. Caribbean people can be found far and wide and have excelled and contributed in every sphere of society, including at the international level. And the Caribbean's history has been a journey of triumph and beating the odds. So, ladies and gentlemen, the investment opportunities in this region are numerous. What is required, however, is investment in critically important areas that link social, economic, and environmental well-being that would lead to real and sustained changes and transformation, together with more robust systems and institutions at the national, the regional, and international levels to facilitate and realize these targeted investments. I trust that after this forum, which features a wide range of regional and international speakers and participants, that you will establish and reinforce strong connections that will produce tangible and mutually beneficial solutions towards a smarter, greener Caribbean and a better and brighter future globally for us all. I thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, another round of applause for our featured speaker this morning. Thank you so very much, Minister. Something that she mentioned, you know, when we all collaborate for the greater good, then no one really loses. It's a win-win situation for all players within the ecosystem, and certainly no one gets left behind. And this forum can be used to showcase progress, potential, possibility across sectors. The time is now. Thank you so very much for that. So that brings us to the end of the formalities. And so before we run into the rest of the conference, when we really start to deliver our keynote speeches, as well as our fireside chats and panel discussions, we just had to give you a little piece of what we had yesterday. Performance of the fusion dance, Ganges meets the Nile with African drumming and Tassa. This piece is called Together as One. We welcome Malik Folk Performing Company and the Shiv Shakti Dance Company. Please put your hands together as we enjoy the entertainment.
Many other nations still have to learn from we, how we aspire and we achieve. It's so hard to believe unity that is so unique. It's fantastic, yes, so to speak. So you see, it's fantastic, yes it is. The way how we live as one. Shooby-dooby-dooby-dooby-doo. In integration, our nation is second to none. Yeah, the East Indian, African, the Chinese, Europeans, we all live together as one. In this wonderland of Calypso, in this wonderland of steel pan, where I was born, my sweet Trinidad, God bless our nation. We may never invent a bomb, no man on moon or no man on Mars. Our population is just over 1 million. So you see, friends, make no mistake, we Trinbagonians have set the pace to prove every color, creed, and race in this world would find an equal place. So you see, it's fantastic, yes it is, the way how we live as one. Shooby-dooby-dooby-dooby-doo. In integration, our nation is second to none. Second to none. Here the first people. The Europeans, Vini Babamwe, Vini Babamwe, Bambamwe, Vini Babamwe, Vini Babamwe, Vini Babamwe, Bambamwe, Vini Babamwe, Vini Bama, Vini Bama, Vini Babamwe, oh, Bambamwe, Vini Babamwe, Vini Bama, Vini Bama, Vini Babamwe, oh, Bambamwe, Vini Babamwe. The Africans.
the East Indian. The Chinese. Syrian Lebanese. We all live together as one in this wonderland of Calypso, in this wonderland of steel pan, where I was born, my sweet Trinbago. God bless our nation. All of we is one family. 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 All of we is one family.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Malik 4 Performing Company and the Shiv Shakti Dance Company, the piece Together as One. Individually, we are amazing, we're creative, we're vibrant, but when we all pull together, we're stronger together, correct? When the music, it hits, you feel no pain. At this time, we're going to take a very quick break. And when I say that, it means a coffee break. I'm going to allow you to go to the back of the room, grab your coffee, and get right back for the highly anticipated keynote, opening keynote address that will be done by His Excellency Wamkele Mene. So one coffee, back to your seat, 5 minutes tops. See you then. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is our time to resume. I hope you got your coffee, took your little break, got refreshed. We are about to resume for the highly anticipated opening of the Caribbean Investment Forum. So we ask you kindly to find your seats so that we may resume. Morning. For the persons who may not have been in the room earlier when we gave the credentials for the Wi-Fi, please look for Hyatt Meeting. The Wi-Fi passcode is 288910. Again, the passcode for the Wi-Fi is 288910. You will need it in order to take the poll, the survey on your tent cards. In the center of your tables, there is a QR code. We're going to ask after each session that you scan the QR code and you give us your feedback of said session. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're inviting you to kindly take your seats so that we can begin in the next minute or so. Again, we want to remind you that there are some tent cards in the middle of your tables. You can scan the QR code, and after each session, we just ask you to take a couple seconds to give us your feedback after each session. When you have the time, we also encourage you to please pass by the booths, speak to the exhibitors, and see how they can help give you solutions where your businesses are concerned. For the speakers in the room, please do not leave without collecting your portrait. So for the speakers in the room, we don't want you to go away to your countries or your other places without collecting your portrait. And it's actually from an artist out of St. Lucia, Anirene Edwards. I got my portrait right here. So again, to the speakers, once you have presented, you've delivered your presentation, don't leave without actually collecting your one-of-a-kind portrait done by Anirene Edwards, an artist out of St. Lucia. I think he did a fabulous job. Like this, the portrait looks better than me. This is where you say, Terry, absolutely not. You are more beautiful in person. But thank you. And it's such a lovely consideration, the Caribbean export. So again, to the speakers, do not leave without collecting your portraits. Thank you. So now that we have gotten our coffee, we are now seated. We await with bated breath for the opening keynote address. I invite you, ladies and gentlemen, to kindly take your seats at this moment so that we may resume. His Excellency Wamkele Mene was elected by the 33rd Ordinary Session of the Assembly of Heads of States and Government of the African Union to the position of Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat. Now, prior to assuming this position, His Excellency occupied the position of Director of International Trade Law and Investment Law at the Department of Trade and Industry, a role in which he was Principal Legal Counsel on international trade law and international investment law. He has written and lectured internationally on international trade law, international investment law, and international business law, which makes him poised and perfect to deliver the opening keynote address. The topic, new markets, new investments for new times. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for His Excellency Wamkele Mene, Secretary General, African Continental Free Trade Area.
Very much, Madam Program Director, the Honorable Minister, our host, Honorable Minister Paula Gupiskun, Minister of Trade, Industry in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, the Secretary General who just left us, the Secretary General of CARICOM, Dr. Carla Barnett, the Chairperson of the Board of Directors of Caribbean Export Development Agency, Dr. Lynette Holder, the CEO of and Executive Director of Export Development Agency of the Caribbean, my dear friend Deodat Maharaj, Mr. Joseph Cox, Assistant Secretary General of CARICOM, the Ambassador of the European Union to Trinidad and Tobago, the Honorable Ministers that are here with us, Excellencies, Ambassadors, and of course, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure to be here today in this inaugural Caribbean Investment Forum. And I am deeply honored to have been invited to share my thoughts on this very important topic today. I want to congratulate the government of Trinidad and Tobago for hosting this high-level event. And of course, I want to congratulate the Caribbean Export Development Agency for the vision and the courage to host an event at a very, very difficult time across the world. It's an honor for me to speak at this event. Africa and the Caribbean have a historical and an emotional bond, which was recognized by the African Union and the Assembly of Heads of States and Government of the African Union, which elected me to this position, when it accorded the people of African descent in the Caribbean the very important status of being a sixth region of the African continent, in addition to the already existing 5 regions of the African continent. The bonds that unite our 2 regions date back over 400 years ago to, of course, a very painful era when Africans were traded as slaves and eventually became part of the character and the fabric of the Caribbean region. The time has come, however, for us to move beyond celebrating the emotional and historical bond that binds us together. We must transform this bond into commercial, investment, and trade opportunities. That is why the session's theme, new markets, new investments for new times, certainly is very current and of critical importance. The need for the bond that locks us together to transition to a commercially meaningful trade and investment relationship is underscored by the state of the world today. The 2 seismic shifts that are taking place around the world underscore the fact that the region of Africa and the region of the Caribbean have to look to each other and have to ensure that the ties that bind us do become not only emotional, but do become commercially meaningful. The 2 events that underscore the need for us to transition beyond a meaningful emotional relationship to a commercial and trade relationship are, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic. Our 2 regions during the COVID-19 pandemic were at the back of the queue for much needed germ-killing products, for much needed vaccines. And I was very happy to hear this morning His Excellency, the Ambassador of the EU, announcing yet another intervention to make sure that nobody is left behind. However, the reality is that in March 2020, our 2 regions were left behind. The second most important seismic shift that has taken place, which underscores the importance for us to ensure that we transition our relationship to commerce and trade, is the conflict that is taking place between Russia and Ukraine, which is impacting on all of us, which is affecting food insecurity, which is causing food inflation and a rise in commodity prices. And so these two events indicate that Africa and the Caribbean region must rely on each other as we see these changes in the paradigms of the world, the economic paradigms of the world. We must diversify our market for exports. We must diversify our markets for investment. And that is why this forum is so very important. Historically, Africa and the Caribbean have relied on traditional export markets for goods and services, but regrettably, our 2 regions have not relied on each other sufficiently for mutual prosperity, job creation, for trade and investment. And although trade between our 2 regions remains negligible, for example, Caribbean exports to Africa account for only 4.4% of total exports. There is a significant potential, however, for increased volumes from the Caribbean to the African region. A recent study by the International Trade Center indicates that trade can be boosted up to $1 billion over the next 5 years in sectors ranging from agro-processing, healthcare, tourism, and the auto sector. As highlighted in this report, expanding African-Caribbean trade with the right support base, Africa can boost annual exports of merchandise to the Caribbean by $170 million by the year 2026, a 54% increase over 200 tariff lines by the year 2026. The Caribbean region can also expand exports of goods to Africa by $80 million or 29%, and its exports of services such as travel and transport even more. The continent of Africa offers an opportunity to the Caribbean as a new partner, an opportunity to diversify your export markets, as I've just said, to create export jobs in the Caribbean, and to be globally competitive. Why should the Caribbean consider Africa as an investment destination? And why should Africa consider the Caribbean region as an investment destination? Let me start with the former question. The African Continental Free Trade Area, of which I have the honor to be the Secretary General, is a free trade area that leverages on a market of 1.3 billion people, with today a combined GDP of 3.4 trillion United States dollars, which is projected by the year 2035 to reach a combined GDP of close to 7 trillion United States dollars. That is both consumer spending and business spending. And so this study that I've just referred to, which makes this projection of a market close to 7 trillion United States dollars, done by McKinsey & Company and the Brookings Institutes, tells us that actually GDP increases in Africa have steadily risen from the year 2015 and steadily risen in sectors that are critical for growth, such as tourism, infrastructure development, financial services, banking services, construction services, and of course, distribution services. And as you know, before the onset of the pandemic, of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world in 2019, 6 were in Africa. At that time, the average growth rate was 3.4% amongst these top performing economies. By the turn of this century, 1 in 4 people in the world will be African. The youngest population in the world positions the African continent for future dynamism, for the ability to increase GDP and purchasing power, and of course, for competitiveness. And so for the first time, the African continent, after 60, 70 years of challenges, smallness of national economies, fragmentation of trade and investment rules, over-reliance on the export of primary commodities, 42 currencies. For the very first time, the African continent is now creating a single rule book for trade and investment. It is, of course, a matter of deep regret to all of us as Africans that it has taken us this long, over 60 years, for us to start the journey of integration. But we take inspiration from models of market integration that have been successful around the world. And as we've heard from His Excellency, the Ambassador this morning, the most single and successful model of market integration in the world is the European Union, which has evolved, for those who are in the Eurozone, which has evolved into a monetary union. And so when you look at the founding mothers and fathers of the Organization of African Unity, the objectives that they set out were twofold. The first objective was to push back colonialism, defeat colonialism in Africa. Arguably, with the defeat of apartheid in South Africa in 1994, that objective was achieved. The second objective of founding mothers and fathers of the Organization of African Unity in 1963 was the economic integration of the African continent. This, of course, has evaded the African continent for decades. And we would be the first to admit that for decades, this objective evaded us. However, with best international practice as a lesson for us, we have now entered into a journey of market integration. We have embarked on this journey of market integration, which starts with the free trade area. A free trade agreement that is high in ambition, the level of and the depth of liberalization, intra-Africa liberalization that we want to see is equally ambitious. It is an agreement that covers trade in goods, trade in services, intellectual property rights, digital trade, competition policy, investment protection, and more importantly, for inclusivity, a protocol on women and youth in trade. This lays the foundation, the legal construct for a future single market in Africa. It also lays the basis for a future monetary union on the African continent. I may not see it in my lifetime, but I do know that the African continent one day shall become a monetary union. Of course, there are challenges that would have to be overcome, challenges such as macroeconomic convergence. These challenges shall be dealt with, and these challenges shall ensure, as we deal with these challenges, we shall ensure that our continent one day becomes a monetary union. Why do we need, beyond the political objectives, why do we need a single market in Africa? Why do we need a free trade area to set us out on this path to becoming a single market? Over the last 60 years, our continent has been overly reliant on the export of primary commodities. Over the last 60 years, the infrastructure on our continent has been established to transit goods, minerals, from the mines to the ports. The infrastructure has not been established to enhance and boost intra-Africa trade. The connectivity has not been established over the last 60 years to ensure that we have self-sufficiency as a continent. As you all know, our continent is well endowed in many, many natural resources that are required for industrial development and to power industrialization in many, many parts of the world. In the year 2019, the African continent imported $16 billion worth of pharmaceutical products. $16 billion worth of pharmaceutical products using inputs that are actually on the African continent. That means that there are opportunities that are amounting to $16 billion, job creation, innovation, competitiveness in the pharmaceutical sector. And so part of the strategy of the African Continental Free Trade Area is to leverage on these natural resources that exist in Africa for value addition, productive sector interventions, to make sure that the African continent is self-sufficient from a public health point of view, but also from an industrial development point of view. This value chain of pharmaceuticals that I've just mentioned is creating and presenting opportunities for investment. The second area which I would like to invite you to think about, and why it is critically important that we develop these trade and investment links. In the year 2014, the African continent exported $4 billion worth of raw, unprocessed coffee and tea, contributing to an industry of over $100 billion, a global industry of over $100 billion. The processing, the repackaging of the coffee that is done in other parts of the world. So you can see the deficit and the losses of the African continent along the value chain, where there is a lack of industrial capacity. The other example which I would invite you to consider and to think about, the African continent has 17% of the world's population. And yet, the African continent produces less than 1 million vehicles per year. Less than 1 million vehicles per year. India, similarly populated to the African continent, produces close to 5 million units of vehicles per year and imports only those components that are essential for productive capacity in India. This deficit in productive capacity in the automotive sector between India and the African continent is actually an opportunity. It's an opportunity for investment in components, for the manufacturing of vehicles. It's an opportunity for investment in the value chain. We know that out of every single unit of investment in the assembling of a vehicle, 4 jobs are created in the component sector. And so whilst we may have countries such as South Africa, Morocco, that are exporters who account for the less than 1 million vehicles that I've just mentioned, there are actually opportunities for other countries to enter the value chain and to be more competitive. We know from the experience of Europe, we know that Airbus is not manufactured only in France, that there's a continental value chain. And it has enabled the European Union as a whole to be globally competitive in aeronautics. And so the vision that we have is to create opportunities for all in a free trade area by identifying those specific sectors in the components area where other countries outside of South Africa and Morocco can benefit. The processing of rubber into tires in Liberia, the processing of copper in Zambia, and more importantly, the transition to green energy, electric vehicles. And so the African continent has significant opportunities, not only for regional competitiveness, but for global competitiveness, leveraging on these natural resources, provided the value addition is done in Africa. Today, the world is transitioning from combustible engines to electric vehicles. The oxide that is required to manufacture electric vehicles, lithium batteries, is in the DRC, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Zambia. Between Zambia and the Democratic Republic of Congo, those combined deposits, between those two countries, they can actually control the global market for lithium batteries and the production of lithium batteries. It's an astounding assessment, but certainly and entirely within reach, in my view. His Excellency, the Ambassador, mentioned the manufacturing of vaccines that has started to happen on the African continent. And I was very honored to be invited by President Kagame when in July, Rwanda hosted a groundbreaking ceremony for the production of vaccines. The production and manufacturing of vaccines is entirely consistent with the objectives of self-sufficiency. It is deeply concerning as an African that less than 10% at the height of the pandemic, less than 10% of Africans were fully vaccinated due to unavailability or inavailability of vaccines. And so the pharmaceuticals regional value chain that we are establishing under the AFCFTA is intended to ensure that we have not only capacity to defeat this pandemic through interventions such as manufacturing of vaccines, but that we have capacity to defeat other pandemics which we know will come. So the public health imperative certainly in our vision, but also there is an industrial development imperative, and that is the continent of Africa must be positioned to produce generic drugs for public health purposes and must be positioned to produce other vaccines, as I've just mentioned. And so agriculture, the automotive sector, pharmaceuticals, these are some of the critical value chains, not only for investment, which is important, but also to drive Africa's industrial development. Between the 55 of us on the African continent, we contribute to global trade and output 2.1%. We contribute to global GDP 3%. Singapore, a city, an island, contributes 6.1% to global trade and output. We know that this deficit certainly is as a result of a shallowness in industrial development and in industrial output and capacity. But the few areas that I've just mentioned, the automotive sector, pharmaceuticals, agriculture, these are the sectors that have the potential in the next 20 to 30 years to position the African continent as probably one of the most globally competitive regions in the world. The deficit in industrial output actually is an opportunity. I say 20 to 30 years because we know that industrial development is not a pill that you swallow and the next day you've industrialized. We know that it is going to take decade after decade of disciplined implementation of our industrial action plan, and decade after decade of disciplined implementation of trade rules for trade liberalization, for liberalization of intra-Africa investment, and of course, for job creation and innovation. Why should the Caribbean think about the African continent, therefore? Well, the value proposition, in my view, is self-evident. A market of 1.3 billion people projected by the year 2035 to be close to 7 trillion United States dollars is a significant opportunity at diversification of your investments, of your exports. Of course, there are challenges. The first challenge is connectivity. I had to come to Trinidad via London. When I went to Barbados a few months ago, I had to travel to Barbados via Miami. And so the challenge of connectivity must be overcome to ensure that the business and trade platforms that we establish, that they are actually established on a very, very solid foundation. And I'm very happy that the African Export and Import Bank, which is wholly owned by African governments, hosted the very first of its kind, the Africa Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum in Barbados in September. Beyond this trade and investment cooperation, we have started cooperation between our two regions in other areas. The African Union mandated Afreximbank, African Export-Import Bank, at the height of the pandemic, to integrate the Caribbean region into Africa's procurement initiative for vaccines in 2021. And when the COVID-19 vaccines arrived and access became a matter of the survival of the fittest at that time, the African Vaccine Acquisition Task Team under Afreximbank and under the political guidance of the African Union enabled the procurement of 3 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines for Caribbean countries at a cost of $23 million, which Afreximbank guaranteed and the African Union provided political support for. This is one area of collaboration and cooperation between our two regions. But as I stress, the more important collaboration and cooperation has to be in the area of trade and investment. And that is why the gathering that we had in Barbados is so critical. And at that gathering, African Export-Import Bank, which is owned by African governments, made a commitment of close to $950 million to invest in the Caribbean region to ensure that there are supply chains that are established, productive capacity, emerging value chains for export between the Caribbean region and the African continent. This is, of course, a critical first step that we have taken. $950 million is not nearly enough. It is, however, a very, very important first step to encourage the trade and investment that we want to see. The value chain for the thousands and thousands of Africans who visit the Caribbean every year, the value chain for that tourism sector is neither based in the Caribbean, nor is it based in Africa. And yet, we see millions of dollars being spent in the tourism sector, but those millions of dollars are not in the Caribbean and are not in the African continent. And so we have to work to reconfigure some of these value chains that take the profits away from the Caribbean or away from the African continent. Africa imports $4.5 billion worth of fish every year from global markets. The Caribbean accounts for these fisheries imports for less than 1% of the trade. And clearly, this deficit, as I keep emphasizing, in my view, is an opportunity for improved and increased trade and investment between our two regions. And so this event today and the assessment that this session is supposed to make about alternative markets comes at a time when the global shifts, the geopolitical, the geoeconomic shifts that we are seeing should compel us to look to other markets. The COVID-19 pandemic and the fact that at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, the global supply chains, when the global supply chains were disrupted, the African continent suffered. I dare say the Caribbean region equally suffered at a time when global supply chains were disrupted. Because some countries decided that it is me first. Some countries decided to impose export restrictions on germ-killing products, on manufactured goods that were required to fight the pandemic. And some countries deliberately suspended operations of global supply chains. That underscores the point, at least to me, that Africa must have a degree of self-sufficiency and must establish regional value chains so that when there is another pandemic or there is another global geopolitical shift, that Africa is able to continue to feed her people, to continue to live up to obligations of public health imperatives, and to continue to industrialize herself. Not for a moment am I suggesting disconnecting from global supply chains. And not for a moment am I suggesting disconnecting from the global economy. We all know that that is not possible. What I am, however, asserting is that the time has come for our two regions to look to each other for this self-sufficiency. Our two regions to look at how export, trade, and investment can provide solid foundations for diversification of export markets. I was saddened when I attended my very first meeting as a junior trade official, where the Caribbean region and the African region were brought together in Brussels. And that in the history, over 400 years of history, our two regions had never had direct contact. Our two regions had never had direct trade and investment links until the arrangement under the ACP. This is for me a matter of deep regret and embarrassment as an African, and that is why I'm here today. Because we have to take it upon ourselves to advance, as I mentioned earlier, to advance our relationship beyond just expressions of emotion. And so, yes, the Executive Director, Jordan, mentioned that I was invited to COP27, but I thought that it was more important to be here. More important to be here because of this historic mission that all of us have to integrate our regions beyond the historical ties and to enter into a new phase. I must confess that the other compelling reason why I am here, apart from the political objective, which is deep in my heart, political objective of integration of our two regions, I started the journey of Africa-Caribbean regional integration at home. My wife is from St. Lucia. So I have a particular responsibility beyond my political office. I have a particular responsibility to be here with you today. And for the second time in a matter of months, here in the Caribbean. And so let me end on this note, if I may. The journey is going to be challenging. The integration of our two regions will be difficult. It may appear at times that it will be insurmountable, but we will require certain tools. We will require certain tools to enable us to withstand the challenges. First tool I mentioned is the Trade and Investment Forum. The second important tool is collaboration between our development finance institutions. And again, I'm most grateful to African Export-Import Bank for the commitment, the financial commitment that they have made to ensure that we create value chains that mutually are beneficial to the Caribbean region and the African region for trade and investment. The other important tool that we will have to explore is a seamless payments platform, a seamless payment system. We have begun this process at the African Continental Free Trade Area, 42 currencies in Africa. The cost of currency convertibility is close to $5 billion. That means that to most Africans, trade is too costly. And so we introduced the Pan-African Payments and Settlement System, which is a digital platform for payments, to enable Africans to trade local currency without trading using a third currency. And this digital payments system, we intend and we hope that the Caribbean region will consider switching onto this platform to ensure seamless continent-to-continent payments for trade and investment. The other important tool that we have introduced is the Intra-Africa Trade Fair, which is a trade fair that is intended to boost intra-Africa business connectivity, trade links, and identification of new markets within the African continent. And so today I invite the Caribbean region to join us in the Intra-Africa Trade Fair, which we will convene along with our partner, AfreximBank, in November next year in Cote d'Ivoire. The last Intra-Africa Trade Fair was held in South Africa, in Durban, in November last year. And according to our estimates, deals and transactions, trade transactions worth over $32 billion were concluded in a matter of 5 days, over 1,300 exhibitors, and over 12,000 attendees. The focus was on young entrepreneurs, exhibitions of trade, trade in goods, goods merchandise, and services merchandise. I wish to see the region of the Caribbean to be part of the Intra-Africa Trade Fair, because as I mentioned earlier, under the African Union, people of African descent in the Caribbean are considered to be the 6th region of the African continent. So let me leave you with words of His Excellency President Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, the first president of Ghana. He quoted, and I said, "The task ahead is great indeed, and heavy is the responsibility, and yet it is a noble and glorious challenge, a challenge which calls for the courage to dream, the courage to believe, the courage to dare, the courage to do, the courage to envisage, the courage to fight, the courage to work, the courage to achieve the highest excellencies and the fullest greatness of humankind. Dare we ask for more in life?" End quote. Dr. Nkrumah made these words decades and decades ago. But I believe that they are as relevant today as they were decades and decades ago. His words continue to be a call to action to all of us, that beyond the emotional bonds that lock us together, this challenge of trade and investment too can be overcome. And when there's another pandemic one day in the world, or some other form of global shift, the region of Africa can look to the Caribbean, the region of the Caribbean can look to Africa for continued and sustained industrial development, investment, trade, job creation, and opportunities. I want to thank you very much for your attention, and I wish all of you very good deliberations over the next few days. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Your Excellency. It was such a deep, I don't know if anyone experienced what I experienced, but it was absolutely deep and it resonated deeply within me. First of all, I would like to thank his wife for her invaluable contribution. Do I get an amen? And I want to acknowledge him for being the smart man and for honoring his Caribbean responsibility by being here. Just very quickly, on a very serious note, as he spoke, what he did was he reinforced and he reminded us of the similarities. We have so many more similarities than we have differences. And he spoke about history and tradition, but he also spoke about realities and the existing challenges, expectations, progress, that yes, we could do more, but we still want to acknowledge the wins, even if they are small, the progress and the hope to come for generations. Thank you so very much for demonstrating how Africa is a frontier for investment for the Caribbean and for sharing the areas that will help to enhance inter-regional investments within the context of seeking new markets and exploring investment opportunities between Africa and Caribbean. I'm excited for where Africa is and where she is going, and I'm excited for the bonds that we will continue to create, not just emotionally, but commercially. Thank you so very much for your delivery, sir. At this time, I'm going to ask my very generous audience to kindly excuse Minister Gopi Schoon, His Excellency Peter Cavendish, His Excellency Wamkele Mene, Dr. Lynette Holder, as well as Deodat Maharaj, because they are called for a particular and exclusive press conference. Therefore, we're just going to give you the opportunity to leave. Thank you for being here. For the audience, there is a tent card right in the center of your table. I'm going to ask you to kindly scan that QR code. We invite you to just do a very quick survey. We just want to get your feedback after each session. It will not take a lot of time. So again, you will look in the middle, the center of your tables, there's a tent card, and we ask that you take a quick poll after each session. Now, as we do that, we could not be here without the contribution of our partners and our platinum sponsors. Therefore, I invite you to kindly turn your attention to the screens for this message.
The AFCFTA group decided to partner with Caribbean Export on this forum because we share a common purpose. And that purpose is to promote the sustainable economic development of the Caribbean region, which is so important to the success of all of its inhabitants. I think I'm most looking forward to the event providing a lot of opportunities, particularly in the renewable energy space. The Republic Bank Group has made a very public commitment to renewable, sustainable energy. And I'm very hopeful that this forum will present a number of avenues for that commitment to be realized.
It is my hope that this Caribbean Investment Forum will not only raise the visibility of the region as an attractive investment destination, but that it will foster strategic relationships between potential investors, policymakers, and the private sector to facilitate increased investments in key sectors and to ultimately spur economic growth and diversification.
Hi, my name is Sekou Allen. I'm the president of Invest Trinidad and Tobago, and looking forward to working with the Caribbean Export Development Agency and the Ministry of Trade and Industry of Trinidad and Tobago in hosting the Caribbean Investment Forum. InvestTT is quite pleased to welcome its regional counterparts in raising awareness of the Caribbean as a sustainable investment destination, And further on, InvestET looks forward to working and hosting investors that will be visiting Trinidad and Tobago, so we can demonstrate the benefits of investing in Trinidad and Tobago as well as the wider region. We look forward to it and hope to see you there.
Hi, my name is Mene Hewitt, co-founder and Chief Relationship Officer at Draper Startup House. We're excited to partner with the Caribbean Export Development Agency in hosting the Caribbean Investment Forum, as we see developing the investment ecosystem as a key component towards a sustainable future of the Caribbean economy. We're looking forward mostly to the pitch competition that we'll be hosting in partnership with the forum, and we're really hoping to have exciting outcomes to startups and founders across the region to benefit from impactful investments. Thank you for this opportunity.
As a global advisory leader, particularly in the 5 pillars that CIF 2022 is focused on, partnering with Export Caribbean was naturally aligned to our purpose. We have invested in building the largest professional services footprint in the region and have a broad and deep understanding of the investment ecosystem. We are therefore looking forward to the matchmaking that CIF will bring to future-focused investors and transformative entrepreneurs. CIF 2022 will certainly redound to the social and economic development of our Caribbean region.
The ICT and digital business component of the Caribbean Investment Forum has really piqued our interest. As a digital marketing and technology company, our team at Apple Digital Agency has had first-hand insights into the gaps and challenges in our region that can be addressed through digital transformation. We're proud to partner with the Caribbean Investment Forum as a conference that is leading the charge in building a smarter and, of course, greener Caribbean.
Again, we thank our partners, our platinum sponsors, without whom none of this would be possible. So we're moving from the opening keynote, which was new markets, new investments for new times. And we're now moving into the master investor address, the topic, the ultimate crescendo, positioning the Caribbean as an investment hotspot. And this speaker, I actually had the opportunity of seeing him present before, and he is absolutely dynamic. Investors want access to available resources at attractive costs, market access and entry, best value for money and high efficiency, and acquire strategic capabilities and new technologies while building synergies. There is no doubt that FDI stimulates local capital investment, facilitates improvement and human capital endowment, improves standard of living, creates jobs, promotes linkages, and triggers higher growth and greater fiscal value. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you our next presenter, our next speaker, who comes by way of Zoom, Nicholas Brathwaite, founding partner, Celesta Capital. Please make him welcome.
Morning. I think it's still morning. I'm assuming you can hear me.
We can hear you, Dr. Brathwaite.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Well, first of all, let me start by saying what an honor and a privilege it is to have been invited here to present. I sincerely apologize that I could not be there in person. I would much rather be in Trinidad today than probably almost any place else, but because of my travel schedules, I could not make it. This is an important topic, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak on it. But let me first start by saying, this is a topic where if you ask 5 different people the same question, what does it take to position the Caribbean as an investment hotspot, I'm sure you'll get probably 5 different answers. My perspective that I'm going to present here today is shaped by my background. And that background is based on the fact that, you know, I'm an investor today. I am co-founded 2 investment firms, but I start by saying I'm a Caribbean, first and foremost, I'm a Caribbean patriot. And although I've spent 2/3 of my life outside of the Caribbean in spirit, I don't believe I ever really left the Caribbean. I'm a technologist. I've been an entrepreneur. I've been a C-level executive who have built very large businesses. And I've sat in the boardrooms of many public companies. And so the experience that I will be sharing with you here are based on, my perspective I'll be sharing with you here are based on these experiences. You know, I don't think I'm getting, if you just excuse me a second. I'm having a little bit of a problem here at my screen, if you don't mind. Just give me 1 second, please. So let me start by sharing, as a Caribbean person, a vision that I've had and shared before with other presentations of a vision that I have for the Caribbean. And this vision is that we will be a region whose global significance is greater than the relative size of our population. I see us as a region where our global significance is greater than the size of our population. And I truly believe in that as a Caribbean person. And I believe that we have the ability to achieve that. You know, our scholars and Nobel Prize laureates are known throughout the world. In fact, I think the previous speaker mentioned that his wife is from St. Lucia. And St. Lucia, with our 2 Nobel Prize laureates, they have the highest per capita percentage, the highest per capita number of laureates, Nobel Prize laureates of any region in the world. We have world-class business leaders. We have record-setting athletes, I would say even world-dominating athletes, highly regarded scientists and engineers, accomplished doctors and nurses, and some of the world's greatest cricketers. I would say we have demonstrated in many fields that we can punch above our weight class. And we have examples of companies that have been built, home-built, to become very successful. Examples are Massey, Sandals, and Grace Kennedy, but there are others. So, but achieving a vibrant and sustainable economy will require some significant changes. One is we have to transform our traditional sectors such as agriculture, fisheries, and others. We have to identify new economic growth engines enabled by technology. And we need true regional integration to enable scale and to fully leverage the intellectual capital in the region. But on top of all of that, we need to foster a culture of innovation and entrepreneurship. This will require the ability to attract significant capital, financial capital, into the region. FDI strategies have generally not delivered. I'm just getting information that you're not able to see my full screen. I apologize for that. Just give me 1 second here. Okay, this should work. FDI strategies have not delivered the economic transformation that we need. For example, our GDP growth has not kept pace with others. But this chart shows, if you look at the somewhat turquoise line, that shows our GDP growth over the last several years or so. And the other lines show some of the regions that are similar to ours and how they've done. So the green line is showing per capita for developing countries with, approximately 4,000 GNI. And the blue line represents regions that are similar in size to us, which is about 13,000 or so GNI. So you can clearly see that our economies, while we've grown slightly, have not kept pace with the rest of the world. If you look at FDI versus private equity investments, as a percentage of GDP, we've been able to attract reasonable amount of FDI. And as mentioned by the moderator, it has helped us, it has provided significant help. The areas that we've lacked investment is in private equity, for example, where the chart on the right shows that we've gone from 6% to as high as 16% of FDI down to about 1% or so. It is not, we just have not been able to attract significant private equity and venture capital investments into the Caribbean. And that's the area that I'd like to focus on during this presentation. If you compare us to India, for example, India has been able in recent times to attract significant private equity and venture capital investments. Over the years, we have seen the percentage relative to foreign FDI, we've seen the percentage grow from in the 40-something% up to most recently over 150% of the FDI investments. So if, in other words, the amount of investment that India has been able to attract from venture capital and private equity investors is about 150% of what they're attracting from FDI in recent times. FDI alone cannot deliver, therefore, the economic transformation that we need. We must attract additional sources of capital. And in my opinion, fostering a culture of entrepreneurship and innovation is arguably one of the most important requirements we have in the region for attracting additional capital. This is a chart that is attempting to show how India has been able to attract significantly more private equity and investment capital than in the past. But let me share with you, if you don't mind, my own story of investing in India. When I was the Chief Technology Officer of Flextronics back in the early 2000s, we decided to start looking seriously at India in order to start building some large business units there. This decision was not driven by what most people were looking at the time, which was labor arbitrage, using India as a labor arbitrage for technical resources. We decided to go into India because we believed in the technical skills and competence that were being developed in India. So we went in there and we acquired several companies and created two businesses out of them. One was a software company that was called Flextronics Software Solutions, which later on was sold to a large private equity firm, KKR, and then became Aricent, which is today one of the top engineering services companies in the world. But we also set up a hardware design service, which many people were not looking at India to do back in those days. But again, because of confidence in India, we set up that business. And that business did very well and ended up being a multi-billion-dollar business. So when we started our investment firms, I don't think it would have surprised anyone that we started very early to invest in India. And today, we have significant investments there. So entrepreneurship has to be an important driver for the economic growth in the Caribbean. And I know we've talked about this many times, many people have talked about it, but I think it's time for us to go beyond the rhetoric and start truly doing the things we need to do to foster an entrepreneurial culture. As an example, this chart shows that here in the United States, over the last 40-something years, almost all net new job creation has come from new businesses. What the chart shows is the gray bars show the net new job losses, of the job losses coming from the established businesses, and the purple line is showing job creation from the new businesses. And you can clearly see here that over the last several years, over the last several decades, almost all new jobs created in the United States have come from new businesses. But starting an entrepreneurial culture, it's important for us to understand what that takes in terms of financing. Many times in the Caribbean, we talk about the fact that we don't have money or we don't have access to money. And I think the purpose of this presentation is to try to show that we will have access to money, but that access to capital comes after ideas. The financing of startups have multiple stages. And this is not true for every single company. Every company doesn't go through the same stages. This is an approximation. Usually a startup is funded initially either by bootstrapping, friends and family, crowdfunding, bank loans, angel investors. This is the early stage. There are some companies that skip this stage and go straight to venture capital, but the majority of startups are funded initially by these types of funding sources. So if we are going to be serious about starting an entrepreneurial culture in the Caribbean, we have to start trying to figure out how we create the initial funding for many of our startups. So we can expand on that a little bit later. Then comes in venture capital. There are a couple of things to notice about this slide. You hear stories oftentimes that 90% of startups fail. Well, most of that failure happens in this first phase, what people refer to as the valley of death. You know, there's some statistics that suggest that 90% of startups fail. I don't know what the percentage is in this, but it's the highest for sure. And after venture capital is invested in a company, the failure rate is a lot less. If you look at the loss ratio of most venture capital firms, it's in the 15 to 25%, which means after you receive venture capital investment, usually you have a pretty good chance of being successful. Usually, you know, as much as, you know, somewhere between 75 and 90% chance of being successful, depending on who your investors are and how much capital you're able to raise. This is also where you see a lot of incubation and what people refer to as accelerators and things like that. And I want to emphasize that while I know we've been talking about things like incubators and accelerators, most successful startups come out of people's homes, kitchens, and garages than incubators and accelerators. So while those things are important, they're not the solution. And then later on, as companies grow on this J curve, on the J part of the curve, you start bringing in private equity. So what are the perceived impediments to large-scale investments in the Caribbean? Number one, and these are perceptions, okay? Let me make it clear. Many may not agree with all of these, but these are perceptions that's shared, especially by the outside world. One, relatively small markets. I think this is clear. If you split up the Caribbean and you look at it separately, the markets are very, very small. We have to take a larger view. We have to take a more regional view. Geopolitical risks and inconsistent policies. This is a big challenge because there's a perception that one government could approve something, and if the government changes, that you have to start over from scratch in many islands, or that the policies between islands are not consistent. And if you're going to invest in a company that is likely to expand, you would likely have to have branches in more than one island. And if the policies between islands are not consistent, that makes it difficult. The previous speaker talked about, you know, what's happening in the European Union and how they've been able to address some of these things. So when you have a major company, that even though the company might be based in France, like Airbus or ST Micro in the semiconductor space, you find them all over Europe. The high cost of labor and perception of low productivity is a perceived barrier. and the perception that we lack competitiveness is a barrier. The perception that there's insufficient innovative thinking, and there is a skills or capacity deficit, mostly capacity, not so much skills. We have great skills, but capacity, do we have enough of the skills required? Again, this is one of the reasons we have to pool our resources, and we also have to make it easier for outside resources to come in. So what does it take? Every stakeholder has a part to play. The government has a major part to play. We need to have improved infrastructure in many places. We have to eliminate bureaucracy or the perception of bureaucracy. We have to implement policies that encourage the transfer of technology and know-how. We have to foster entrepreneurship. We have to have consistent long-term policies. And we have to pay equal or maybe even more attention to local businesses and entrepreneurs as we do to FDI. And the government has to make sure they put the right frameworks in place and then clear the path for progress, and please get out of the way. One of the challenges we face is the government stays in the way. We have to create the framework and then get out of the way. But CARICOM and regional organizations like this one, like the sponsors of this program, have a part to play as well. They have to help drive deeper regional integration. We have to eliminate the petty barriers that divide us so that we can have deeper integration. We have to develop new economic corridors. As was mentioned before, I think Africa and India in particular are two that we have to pay attention to. To quote Prime Minister Mia Mottley, the Caribbean is one of the first outposts of both India and Africa, and we need to take advantage of that. And I think this is the time when India and Africa are starting to emerge and flex their muscles. And this is a good time for us to start establishing new and meaningful economic corridors with those regions. We must reimagine our trade relationships as they exist today. We have to improve government and commercial partnerships, and I think the regional organizations have to play a major role in that area. We have to support development of new growth engines in ways we haven't done before, and we have to help improve global competitiveness. I want to pause and make a point here that we talk a lot about a lot of these things. Many of the things we talk about, other people have talked about. I've been reading speeches and hearing speeches about this in the Caribbean for many years, and it's time to stop the rhetoric and actually start doing something. I am not sure if there has been any bills or policies passed by government specifically aimed at improving entrepreneurship in the Caribbean, but it's time for us to see those. It's time for us to stop hearing speeches and start seeing real action. Universities also have to play a role. We have to graduate more innovative thinkers. There is no doubt that we graduate top quality people, but our educational system is still heavily focused on theory and graduating theorists. And we have to start graduating more thinkers, entrepreneurs, and business leaders. Our university, UWI, has produced a vast percentage of our political leaders, and probably have with business leaders as well. But we need a new generation of business leaders emerging in order to deal with the challenges that we face today. And we need more investment in business-driven research. The financial ecosystem also needs to play a role. We need more entrepreneurial-friendly banking policies. As I mentioned, the early stages of entrepreneurship often depends on local or close to the investor type financing sources. We need easy access to banking and debt. We need government funding support, and we need initiatives that would allow the diaspora to be more involved in the financial ecosystem of our entrepreneurs, of our entrepreneurial activities. For example, there should be easy ways to allow our diaspora to get involved in funding some of the new companies that we have being developed. It is very difficult to do that on an individual basis. And so there should be some kind of a framework set up that allow especially high net worth individuals, but also people who are interested in investing in small amounts, to pool the money and invest in new opportunities. And we need support from established businesses. One other thing I want to add here that is not necessarily included here in this is that our established businesses, governments, etc., need to find ways to better identify the opportunities that we support. And then our diaspora. We need to better leverage our diaspora for expertise, experience, network connection, intellectual and financial capital. The diaspora of the other diasporas have played a major role in helping to grow their economies beyond just barrels and sending home barrels and other support. For example, in India, many of the opportunities for early startups in India that grew to be big companies came as a result of connections between the people starting those businesses and Indians who were highly placed in companies in the US who provided opportunities for them. Same for Israel and other locations. We need to better leverage our diaspora to connect us to opportunities, market opportunities, and other opportunities for our businesses. So what would it take? It takes two things to attract major investments. One, a vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystem, and secondly, a credible vision for economic transformation with big, audacious goals. Investors like rallying around bold vision and big goals. We must improve entrepreneurial outcomes. The focus should not be on how many businesses were registered, but rather on what impact our startup businesses are having. There is no doubt that we have a lot of entrepreneurial type activity. Over the last 10 years or so in the Caribbean, we've seen over 150,000 new companies registered. One of the problems is not the number, is the type. There are many of them are shell companies. Some of them are what you would call single proprietorship. And so we've had very little impact on unemployment rates. So if you look at these lines, you will see that with all of this startup activities, new businesses being registered, we have not significantly impacted our unemployment situation. So what would it take? We have to rethink our approach to entrepreneurship. First of all, Caribbean entrepreneurs need to tackle tougher problems than we have so far. This will require pooling of regional intellectual capital and a global perspective. I have said before in previous talks in the Caribbean, we will see 3 different people across the Caribbean, sometimes 10, trying to start the same type of business. I remember some years ago, there were several people in Jamaica, Barbados, and Trinidad trying to start gaming businesses. And there were people in Grenada and other places trying to do the same. Instead, what we need to do is get together. If all of those people have the ability, let's get together and create one big gaming company. We have the ability to do so. We need deeper integration. We need improved human capital mobility. And I know there have been some things that we've done to improve some of these things, but it's not good enough yet. We need greater access to markets and more supportive government policies. Technology now exists that makes it possible for us to build global businesses. And I believe that there is no reason why certain companies could not have been founded in the Caribbean. For example, I do not believe there's any reason why a WhatsApp or a Twitter that's been in the news a lot recently could not be started in the Caribbean. We must think globally. In the past, there have been cultural barriers, information barriers, trade barriers, and other things that have limited the ability to start businesses in the Caribbean and be global. That is no longer true. We now have access to information much easier communication channels, global marketplace, ease of travel. The world is now global, and we must think globally. Even if you're starting a business in the Caribbean that is aimed to serve the Caribbean, you still have to think globally because your competition could come from outside the Caribbean. So you have to have a global perspective. And as I mentioned, technology now enables us to start global businesses from everywhere. Atlassian is out of Australia. I'm sure many of you know some of these companies. Globant, which is my favorite on this list, is out of Argentina. The reason Globant is my favorite is that at Riverwood Capital, this was one of the first investments we made when we started our firm. It was a very small, local services business and IT type services business. And that company was transformed into a global company, was the first startup in Argentina, technology startup in Argentina to go public on the New York Stock Exchange. And today it has a valuation of multiple $1 billion. Grammarly out of Ukraine, Minecraft out of Sweden, Spotify out of Sweden, Skype, Estonia, Nubank, Brazil, and Walla, also Argentina. We now have the ability to create large global businesses from anywhere. So why not the Caribbean? We need capital. I mentioned earlier, and we need lots of capital, but I do not believe that our biggest problem is a lack of capital. I think our biggest problem is a lack of articulated, bold vision and plans. As an investor, we follow ideas. Money is a commodity. Money is not what creates value. It is a commodity that the people with the intellectual capital use in order to create value. We need to start demonstrating that we have intellectual capital, which we do have, but we just need to be more bold about it, set bold visions and credible plans. As I mentioned, money follows bold vision. I once said that my only experience where money comes before vision and ideas is if you're born super wealthy. Other than that, you have to have the vision and the ideas first. Then the money will follow. So here's an example of a bold vision. Why don't we, as a Caribbean people, set a goal to create 500,000 new jobs over the next 10 years and triple our GDP by 2032? Now, is that possible? I say for sure it is, and I'll use India as another example. India's GDP today is about $3 trillion US, and India is today ranked number 5 as the 5th richest country in the world, the 5th highest GDP. And by 2027, their GDP is expected to be over 5 trillion and be ranked number 4. Those types of growth rates are possible, but we must foster and develop a vibrant entrepreneurial culture and also make the Caribbean more attractive for both local and foreign entrepreneurs. I believe this is something that is possible. And I think if we rally around visions like this, it doesn't have to be this one, but if we rally around visions like this and then put in place all of the policies and capabilities we need to have to make it happen, I think investments will pour into our region. And when that happens, we will achieve the vision for the Caribbean as a region where our global significance is greater than the relative size of our population. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Brathwaite. Certainly during your presentation, there are many things that resonated with me, especially when he spoke about fostering innovation and entrepreneurship. My daughter is 10, and I believe that we're still, in our educational system, we're still churning out students who get the grades, who are academically sound, but they only learn to regurgitate and to go and work for other people, but not necessarily to be ambitious and audacious, to start their own businesses and to think globally. So we need to get out of the mindset of we're just going to try a little thing. We're just going to do like a side hustle, but for it to be something that is viable and sustainable, that attracts great global investors. Thank you so very much, Dr. Brathwaite. So this is where we actually open up for questions and answers. We have someone who is in a great position as someone who is Caribbean. He understands what global investors are looking for. He himself. Are there any questions from anyone here on the floor? Don't be shy. We do have mics that are available. So just let me see a show of hands. Any questions? We have a question right here. Could we get the mic? Where? Center of the room. Thank you so very much. And you can let us know where you're from. And then I have a question over there. Dr. Brathwaite, if you can't see us, can you see us at all?
I can see you, yes.
Okay, because if you said no, I'd tell you that I'm looking beautiful. But
by the way, you do.
oh, thank you. Thank you so very much. Go right ahead. Hold on 1 second. We can't seem to hear her. Is her mic
Hello,
on?
hello, hello.
Ah,
Oh, yeah.
perfect.
Hello. First of all, thank you for that brilliant, crisp, articulate presentation and inspiring. I'm Sherry Novick. I have a company called V Ventures out of New York and more recently Charleston, South Carolina. I love the Caribbean. I've had the pleasure of working with the government of Trinidad and Tobago, prime minister, ministers, CEOs of public and private sector and civil society on various types of programs to attract FDI, trade and tourism, and drive sustainable economic development through innovation. How can I contact you? Lots to talk about. I have a consortium of players from the region and outside. We're developing sustainable growth strategies, economic development, sustainable financing projects, et cetera.
Well, it's easy to contact me. I'm on LinkedIn, first of all, so you can contact me on LinkedIn, and my email is very easy. It's nic@celesta.vc.
Look at everyone writing that down.
Thank you kindly, truly appreciate it. And you will hear from me.
Thank you so very much. Thank you for that. I do believe we have a question over on that side of the room. Thank you so very much.
Good morning, everyone. I am Shan Kafi Young, and I'm here representing my own organization called SIAL Environmental. I'll take in the clap. Let me hear it now. Right. One of the key takeaways from your talk, Dr. Brathwaite, is when you talked about transforming traditional sectors. So I work in waste management, which is still very much a traditional sector. We take, we make, we waste. Now we have conversations like the circular economy and design thinking and all of that happening. So my question to you is, one, what is one of the ways that you see that we could continue to transform our traditional sectors? Thank you.
Well, agriculture is one I can give examples from. And by the way, this is happening in other parts of the world. And I don't want to sound here like a commercial for India, but we've now made about 11 investments in India over the last several years. About 15% of our investments are in India. And one of the areas that we're investing heavily in is on this whole idea of transforming traditional sectors, one of which is agriculture. Technology is now available that will allow us to do agriculture differently. And one of the challenges we have in the Caribbean, for example, is how do we get young people more involved in agriculture? Well, for one thing, we can't continue to treat agriculture the way we do. Today, agriculture is mostly subsistence farming, and we have to transform that into a business. We have to have a more business approach, and we have to leverage technology to improve productivity. And that is true on almost everything. I'll give you an example of what is happening in India in the dairy industry, where we've made a significant investment. The dairy industry is made up of thousands of people, dairy farmers in thousands of villages who have, a few cows. The problem you have with that is it's very difficult to help them to aggregate their products and get them to market and get fair value for the quality of their products. And you now have technology that can provide all of that. The technology platform can also provide access to funding and other support that the farmers need. By doing so, you significantly improve productivity. By doing so, you also improve access to markets, and you actually have the ability to improve the value that people get. In places like, I'm from Grenada, and I was in Grenada recently, and we toured a nutmeg processing area. And, you know, we were shocked that what the farmers get paid for a bag of nutmeg, a big bag of nutmeg, is less than what you pay for a vial of nutmeg in the supermarket. How do you increase value? How do you provide more support to the farmers so they know the things they have to do, and you provide guidance to them and access to markets and the ability to aggregate their products and those types of things? But it's technology, and we've tried to do that in the Caribbean by doing things like starting national marketing and important boards and so, but we haven't really leveraged technology to create a significant difference in the way things are done. So I know that might not be the exact, those are examples that might resonate with your specific situation, but I think leveraging technology specifically to improve access, improve productivity, improve quality of service is the way to transform our traditional sectors.
Thank you so very much. You had said one question, I think you said question one. Did that mean that you had another one? Okay, thank you very much for your answer, Dr. Brathwaite. And I think what he was saying, I think it's absolutely correct. Our youngsters are doing coding. A lot of them are doing gamification. They're figuring out developing and coding, but they're looking at it from a software/hardware standpoint, but they're not necessarily tying it into the agricultural sector. How can they actually leverage that technology? So it does require reimagination, repositioning, and redefinition of how we approach areas like agriculture. Next question.
Thank you so much. Pleasant good morning, Dr. Brathwaite and my colleagues. I'm Samantha Roll, representing Access Accelerator, the Small Business Development Center in the Bahamas. Thank you, first of all, for your presentation. During your presentation, you mentioned that Access Accelerators or accelerator programs play a role. And I'm curious to understand from your perspective what role they actually play, considering that they may not be a key factor from what you had indicated, but then also further, how can they become more impactful within the entire network or ecosystem to foster entrepreneurial culture and add the necessary benefits needed?
Thank you.
Okay, so let me be clear. I think accelerators and incubators can play a significant role. I just don't think they are playing, many of them are playing as significant a role as they should. And that's because I think we've taken a buzzword approach to accelerators and incubators. If you walk through most incubators and accelerators, what you see are desks and computers. And people believe that if you provide a building and some computers and desks, that's what it takes to accelerate success. And that is just not true. There's no startup that has failed because they didn't have a computer or a desk. And if they did, then they weren't supposed to be successful anyway. What creates success is intellectual capital. And the accelerators need to make sure that they're providing intellectual capital, which means things like mentorship. You know, companies fail not because they run out of money. They fail because of the reason why they ran out of money. And the reason they ran out of money has to do with poor decisions that are made along the way. And you make enough poor decisions, then you run out of money and you can't get out of the hole that you've dug yourself into. And so accelerators, if they are truly going to be accelerators, what you should be doing is you should be eliminating the number of pitfalls. So what does an accelerator do? If you look at the way a business grows, it doesn't grow along a nice smooth S-curve like the one I showed or the one you see in business school. That's a best fit. Companies grow with ups and downs, ups and downs. You make a mistake, you go down, something happens, you go down, you didn't anticipate something, you go down, and you have a lot of these, call them potholes along the way. And if you want to accelerate a company's success, you have to eliminate a bunch of those potholes. And that's how you accelerate success. So an incubator, an accelerator, well, an accelerator is better. An incubator I'll come back to that. An accelerator should be able to help eliminate some of the potholes that companies typically get into, because you fail when you get into a pothole that you just couldn't get out of because you went into one too many. So the problem with many of the accelerators is just a name for a building with desks and computers. And if that's all you're doing, it's not an accelerator. Incubators, I have a personal problem with incubators in that I'm not even sure what a lot of them are. I think in many cases, incubators are incinerators. Nothing actually comes out of their life.
I did say before that I found him to be a very dynamic speaker. I forgot to also tell you he's absolutely frank. And I think we need honesty and we need transparency. We certainly heard about the buzzwords between incubator and accelerator. And for many organizations and companies, it's a PR thing. A lot of them add it on because it looks good and it makes a company look good on paper. But again, it really comes down to strategy, planning, and putting the right persons who can help to guide that process. Do I have any more questions? I have a question right here. And if that is it, that would probably be the last one before we go and we let Dr. Brathwaite.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My name is Kiefer Vitalis. I'm from the island of St. Lucia.
Oh, lovely.
My background is mainly in the area of construction, building materials, and property development. But of late, I've delved into the area of renewable energy, sustainable organic farming in the areas of aquaponics and so on, which is sustained and run by solar power. One of the things that we continue to hear in our islands in St. Lucia over the years is the ease of doing business. And in major conferences and government presentations. However, it has become quite difficult doing business. It has become quite difficult banking. Everything seems to take more effort, more time. What can we do, first of all, to have our governments understand that it is not necessarily the person with the big degree, the masters and the doctorates that will stimulate the economy, that would come up with ideas and systems and put them in place to cause that sort of entrepreneurship to happen. It seems as though a lot of times government policies are actually, agencies are actually a stumbling block for businesses to achieve and accomplish what they need to accomplish to stimulate, create jobs, and create entrepreneurship. How can we encourage our governments to make that paradigm shift in the thinking that will cause entrepreneurship and business to flourish?
Thank you so very much for your question. And I'm sure Dr. Brathwaite is not going to point to the part where he said they need to just help and get out of the way. Dr. Brathwaite, over to you.
Yes, I think when we talk about, let's start with ease of doing business. I think there are two different areas. One is, I think many Caribbean islands are focused on improving the ease of doing business, but their focus is really on improving the ease of doing business to attract more FDI dollars. I don't think there is enough focus placed on the ease of doing business for entrepreneurs. So I think we have to make sure that just because we improve the ease of doing business to attract FDI doesn't necessarily mean that those things we are doing are relevant for the business that's already in our region. So that's why I mentioned that we have to place as much focus on businesses we already have and on our local entrepreneurs as we do on FDI. For example, I'll give you an example. We have islands where we are trying to track, we might have a call center, and we are trying to attract more call centers. So we put things in place to try to figure out how do we get new call centers to come in without spending time on what would it take to help the call centers that are already in to grow. So for example, if we focus on it's easier to focus on how we help the companies we already have to grow, or how we help our entrepreneurs to grow, than what we do to help attract more FDI. So I think that's one of the things we have to do. I think the other challenge is a little bit tougher, because in order for us to be able to understand which entrepreneurs or which ideas to back, we have to have people who are reviewing those ideas that have some knowledge of what the competitive landscape look like, what the opportunities are, etc. And the problem is, and I say this not intending any disrespect, so please understand that the problem is, if we just have bureaucrats making those decisions, it's very difficult because they just don't have the knowledge to be able to make the decisions. And so you can't blame people for not making the right decisions if we haven't equipped them with the knowledge, or we haven't added people in the mix who can help us to identify opportunities. You know, in venture capital investing, a big part of it is to identify the right opportunities and understand the right people to back. And then, you know, you bring the money in to help them. But identifying the opportunities and the people to back are important. And then if you believe in an idea or an opportunity, then we have to put the full might of the Caribbean behind them to help them to be successful. If you look at what happens in other countries, China is one example. But even if you look at the venture capital space, where you have some VCs who the real key differentiation is they will put enough money behind a company in order to give that company a competitive advantage from a financial perspective. But it's not just financial. If there's a startup happening in St. Lucia that the St. Lucian government believe has the potential to be a Caribbean-wide success and bring advantage to the Caribbean, then they should be talking to other islands and trying to get backing and support for this company everywhere. So we don't have to do this individually. Specifically, though, I want to make a comment on aquaponics and so, because there's a lot of that happening in the Caribbean, and we've invested, our firm has invested in that space as well. One of the challenges in that space today is that the approach we're taking is not likely to be successful, because that same approach has not been successful anyplace else. And if it's not successful anyplace else, there's a good chance it will not be successful in the Caribbean. And that is, you can't just simply move the farm inside of a building. You have to develop processes that optimizes for the building. So you see many, for example, where there's huge energy consumption. So a solar improves that for sure. But then there are other issues where there's huge water consumption, depending on how people are doing it. And then there's other issues in terms of limited types of crops you can grow. I think one of the ways to look at this is to take more of a manufacturing approach, where you towards indoor agriculture, which I think has the potential to significantly differentiate the Caribbean from some of the other approaches. But doing something that 20 other countries have tried with more money than us and haven't been successful isn't going to be successful likely either. And I'm not saying that's what you're doing. I don't know what you're doing, but I'm just saying that that's one of the challenges we have. When people review these opportunities and they look at it and they say, well, this has been tried 50 times already and failed. Why should I put money behind this? You have to show them why you're differentiated. So get beyond the headlines of aquaponics and start talking about specifically what you are doing to overcome some of the challenges that others have had.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Brathwaite. Ladies and gentlemen, do you agree that this was a fantastic session? Please give him a round of applause. Dr. Brathwaite, I know that you're a very busy man. Therefore, thank you for just fitting us in, squeezing us into your schedule, and for being so forthright and so honest with us during the question and answer segment. We wish you all the best. And when I see you next, I want my bag of nutmeg. Thank you so very much.
Absolutely. Thank you
care.
very much. And again, I apologize for not being able to be there in person. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, oh, absolutely. He's one of my favorite speakers in the world. And he's doing it big on a global stage as a brother of the Caribbean. So again, just a reminder, those little 10 cards in the middle of your tables, scan the QR code, and of course, just take that 2-second poll/survey so that we can get feedback from the session. So now it brings us to one of the very important parts of our schedule, lunch. But before you get up, I would like to invite Chef Zanisha Samaru to speak about lunch, of course, what we can expect and what makes it special. Please put your hands together for Chef Samaru. Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Terry Carell-Reed. That was a really nice welcome. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Wishing you all just an awesome day. As most of you already would have seen me this morning, I